They said some of these guns wouldn't last a year. Too rough, too simple, too old. But here we are in 2025, and they're still standing while others rusted, jammed, or disappeared. These guns weren't built for shells or showcases. They were built to be used, drawn, and dragged through hell. And somehow, they just kept firing no matter what. Every scratch and every dent tells a story of a fight won, a failure avoided, and a truth proven. Dealers thought they'd phase out. Shooters thought they'd upgrade. Instead, they survived and made the fancy ones look weak. You won't believe how close some of these came to dying off and why they refused to. Because when everything else failed, these 10 pistols didn't. A few years back, I ended up on a short job out of town. Nothing major. Didn't plan on needing a sidearm, so I bought what was available. A Canik TP9 SF. No light, no optic, just irons and a half-worn soft holster that didn't even fit it right. I didn't expect to use it, but things changed fast. Long days, hot weather, dust and everything. One guy's gun had a mag issue, another lost a red dot mid-drill. The Canik, however, I dropped it once getting out of a truck hard onto gravel, racked it, wiped it off with my sleeve, and kept moving. That afternoon turned into a full work session. Quick reps, hot barrels, dirty mags, gloves soaked with sweat. The TP9 SF ran all of it. Never slowed down, trigger stayed sharp, slide stayed smooth, no light strikes, no drag, no nothing. We shot hundreds of rounds across 2 days, didn't even clean it once. The only maintenance it saw was a napkin wipe under a flashlight. Didn't think much of it at the time, wasn't trying to be impressed, but packing up on the last night, I realized that cheap Canik had quietly outlasted everything else. And now I get it. Not every tank has to look like one. There's a Glock 17 Gen 3 I've shot more than any other pistol in my life. Not mine, of course. It belonged to a guy I used to work with. Quiet and didn't even talk much unless it mattered. He was former law enforcement, ran private security after retiring. That Glock lived in his truck, in his waistband, and in his toolbox. Wherever he was, it was there. The slide was worn silver at the edges, grip texture almost gone, barrel smiley so wide it looked like it had been polished on a lathe, and he never cleaned it. Said it had been at least 5 years since he took it apart, still carried it every day. One time we were out shooting steel on a friend's land. He pulled that Glock from a nylon pouch full of random junk, loose ammo, a flashlight, even a spoon for some reason. He didn't warm up, didn't wipe it down, just loaded a mag and ran steel like it was nothing. That same day, I had a newer pistol that gave me trouble. Slide lock failed, had a few FTEs, and meanwhile, that Gen 3 kept cycling like it was 2004 again. I remember asking him later why he never upgraded. He shrugged and said, "What for? It still works." That stuck with me, because in a world where everyone wants the next gen optic cut, flared magwell edition, that old Glock just stayed. No optics, no light, no stippling, no name drop trigger. Just a bone stock pistol that flat out refused to die. Sometimes reliability isn't exciting, it's just there every single time you need it. I've used an HK USP9 a handful of times. Range gun from a friend who never cleans anything. The thing had maybe 5,000 rounds through it before I ever touched it, and it still ran like it was bored. There's no charm to the USP. It doesn't feel warm in the hand. It feels mechanical, cold, big controls, sharp edges, slides like a steel brick, but once you start shooting it, you get why people call it overbuilt. I've seen it take dry drops onto concrete, overhand racks with gloves, even a stovepipe drill where the casing got pinched hard. It cleared without a complaint. The polymer frame is thick, the slide is massive, and somehow it feels balanced when it's running. The recoil system inside is built like it expects abuse. I remember one session where we ran it until the frame was hot to the touch. It never slowed down. Didn't matter what ammo, didn't matter how dirty. HK didn't make this gun to be fun. They made it to survive. It's not pretty or neither modern. The trigger's not gonna win any shitty awards, but I've used a lot of pistols that talk a big game about durability. The USP just quietly proves it. If everything else on the bench breaks down, this is the one you pick up. Not because it's exciting, but because you know it'll still fire. Now stick around. My number 2 pick is a gun that literally ran for 2 days straight without cleaning. You won't believe which one. Texas heat changes how you think about guns. Sweat, dust, lint, cheap belts, long drives. Everything gets tested out here, especially the thing riding on your hip day in and day out. I've used a lot of pistols over the years, but in my hometown, when I needed one gun that I didn't have to think about, I went with the Glock 19 Gen 5. No tricks, no add-ons, just a factory pistol in a basic Kydex holster. I've carried it in 100-degree heat, through rain, mud, edge breakdowns, and long nights parked under highway lights. It's been knocked against fence posts, tossed under car seats, and carried IWB through shifts where everything else was uncomfortable, and it's never failed. I've drawn it slick with sweat, fired it after it sat dry for weeks, trained with it till my hands bled, not ever cleaned it as often as I should have, still never once congested, not once. You start understanding over time, mainly out here, that you don't need a perfect trigger or fancy optics when the real world's messy. You need something that doesn't care what condition you're in. The 19 Gen 5 just works. It's not the most exciting, it's not the latest, but every time I holstered it in Texas, I knew it was one less thing I had to worry about. That's why it's number 1. Not because it's impressive, but because it's always there and it always works. The SIG P226 doesn't need to prove anything anymore. You look at one, rack a slide, run a mag, you get it. There's a weight to it, literally and otherwise, built like it's meant to survive decades, not trends. People keep sending me stories about theirs, everything from duty guns that saw thousands of rounds without so much as a spring replacement to absolute chaos. One guy emailed me a P226 accidentally discharged inside a patrol vehicle during a snowstorm and still kept running dry for months afterward. Another swears his buddy dropped one down a flight of stairs during a night shift and it bounced, hit a desk, and still stayed on target. And then there was a comment I saw once, wild stuff, said the FBI had one show up as evidence in a sting involving a naked prostitute, an old contractor, and a false wall in a Nevada motel. Can't verify it and don't need to. If there's any pistol that could survive that mess and still cycle, it'd be this one. There's been quiet talk for years about SIG wanting to move away from this platform, but too many departments pushed back, too many shooters just wouldn't give them up. Some people still carry them daily, not out of nostalgia, but because they trust the feel of steel and hammer more than anything new. The P226 wasn't designed to be cool, it was designed to survive, and that's exactly what it keeps doing. The one I used was pulled from an old department armory back in 2018. Still have the original box tucked behind the shelf, stamped 1994. Over 2 decades old, and it looked like it. Slide was scuffed silver at the edges, grip panels chewed up, magazine barely popped out without a slap, but it's still locked up like a vault. You could tell this thing had been around the block more than once. They handed it to me during a training day. I didn't ask for it, it was just there. Left behind after everyone else grabbed the newer stuff. No optics, no rails, no flare. Just cold steel and weight. I loaded it up, expecting it to feel slow, maybe even stiff, but the first few rounds, dead on. Trigger was heavier than I was used to, but clean. Recoil was soft, and the gun, it felt like it remembered what it was supposed to do. We ran 3 full mags through it that day without a single time of cleaning or lube. It didn't even cough. Yep. That's when I looked down at the frame, at that faded Smith & Wesson engraving, and thought, how is this thing still running? 24 years of wear, probably thousands of rounds, and it still shot like it was in the middle of its career. You don't see guns built like that anymore. Stainless steel frame, old school hammer, built for duty, not comfort, no shortcuts. Most pistols today don't even make it to 10 years before something cracks or gets replaced. This one was still running after almost 30. Really mind-blowing, wouldn't you think? There's this old guy who shoots at my local range every other Sunday. A retired army guy, pretty quiet, and always brings the same pistol, a worn-out Beretta M9. It looks like hell, scratched to pieces. You can barely read the markings on the slide anymore. I always figured it was just sentimental, the gun he carried back in service or something like that. One day I asked him about it. He just nodded and said, it's been through 3 deployments, dropped in a ditch, left in the rain, still runs. I asked when he last cleaned it. He laughed. Years ago, still haven't needed to. He let me run a Mac through it. I didn't expect much. The slide was loose, the finish was gone, sights were barely usable, but it cycled like it had been oiled that morning. No hesitation, no jams, smooth, clean function, like a brand new pistol hiding under all that wear. You can say what you want about the size or the safety, but you can't argue with what I said. That gun had survived more than most people ever will, and it still had perfect manners. Every time I see someone sneer at the Beretta, I think of that old man and his M9, still going strong long after people stop talking about it. Some guns earn your respect when you shoot them, others earn it when you realize what they came back from. I used a Ruger P95 during a job years ago. Not mine, it was handed to me by a guy who kept it under the driver's seat in a nylon holster that looked like it hadn't been washed ever. First thing I noticed, it felt like a cordless drill. Top heavy, thick grip, no balance. Finish was worn, controls were stiff, but he said it runs, and we didn't have time to argue about ergonomics. That weekend was rough. Cold, muddy, wet gear. We were working outdoors at the time. Long hours, no cover, rained twice. Everything was soaked, including the gun. It got dropped, got shoved into a wet ruck next to a rusted multi-tool. I wiped it once with a towel and left it alone. At the end of the 3rd day, I finally took it to a gravel pit and ran 2 full mags through it. No cleaning, no lube. It cycled clean, no failures, no dragging. It didn't even feel sluggish, just loud, sharp, and ugly. That's when I got it. The P95 isn't smooth, it's not fun to shoot, but it's the gun that survives the trip, sits forgotten under your gear, and still fires when everything else is jammed or too pretty to risk. You don't bond with it, you trust it. And sometimes that's more important. There's a reason you don't see CZ75s tossed around like glonks at a gun show. They're not for everyone. They're heavy, old school, and don't care what your holster preference is. But the ones that have been around, they've seen things. There's a beat-up CZ75B floating around my buddy's family, handed down from his uncle who picked it up during his time in Eastern Europe. Nobody knows how many rounds it's had through it. It's been dropped on frozen concrete, left in a damp basement for 2 winters, and even once loaned to a guy who forgot to bring it back for almost a year. When they got it back, it was a little rusty on the outside. Inside, still ran like it never left the range. I fired that exact pistol. No optic cut, no rail, fixed sights, heavy DA pull. But it shoots straighter than most modern polymer guns I own. The slide runs inside the frame, Weird if you're used to Glocks, but once you get a feel for it, it's like guiding a piston. One of my subscribers told me they dropped theirs down a rocky hillside on a backpacking trip. Picked it up, shook out the dirt, fired it right there, no hesitation. You won't find the CZ75B in most EDC build-out videos, and that's just fine. This isn't a gun you flex with, it's a gun you bury, forget about, dig up 5 years later, and it still hits center mass like nothing's ever happened. I had to carry an XDM Elite for a weekend job a while back. Wasn't my choice. My usual setup was down due to parts issue, and this was what a friend handed me last minute. I didn't like it. Too many lines, too light of a trigger. Controls felt oversized. I figured I'd babysit it, pray nothing went wrong, and never talk about it again, but it surprised me. That weekend turned out rough. Long hours, gear bag getting tossed around, temperature swing from hot sun to damp cold. Holster got wet, gun was exposed more than I liked. I checked it constantly, half expecting it to choke, and it never did. I ran a full function check on day 2. Chambered fine, cycled clean, reset sharp, no failures, trigger still consistent, and didn't feel dry. The thing I noticed the most, it felt locked in, not soft, not loose, just planted, like it didn't care what I thought of it. It was just doing its job. When I finally got my own pistol back the following week, I didn't think about the XDM again. But weeks later, it crossed my mind, not because I missed it, but because it never failed me when it had every reason to. I didn't like it, still don't, but I trust it now. Some guns survive the test of time. The FN57 laughs at it. It was never built to impress the old crowd, it was built to outlive them. Polymer frame, high velocity cartridge, and a slide that shrugs off heat most pistols can't even dream of handling. They said the plastic would warp, the round would fade, and the platform would die out once the hype cooled off. But here it is, 2 decades later, still running clean, still chewing through whatever ammo that you feed it. That 5.7 by 28mm round doesn't just punch holes, it makes armor nervous. And the pistol that fires it has outlasted fans, critics, and every other so-called next-generation copy. You drop it, drag it, bake it in the sun, and it still fires. That's not luck, mind you, that's design. And every man who's owned one knows, once it's broken in, it's damn near immortal. The FN57 doesn't just live long, it makes other guns look fragile trying to catch up. Most guns fade with time, but these don't. They took hits, abuse, and neglect, and still came back for more. In a market chasing trends, these pistols proved one thing. Real durability doesn't need attention, it just needs time. So next time you're holding something new, ask yourself, will it survive like these did, or will it just shine for a reason and then vanish? The ones that lasted, they earned it. And in 2025, survival's not luck, it's legacy. This is Steve, and I'll see you in the next one.